Welcome to Puck Academy, a show about how hockey players grow on and off the ice. I'm Jason Jacobs, the host, and each week I talk with players, coaches, and experts shaping the future of player development. Today's guest is Tyler Holske, whose path through hockey spans playing, coaching, management, and scouting across nearly every level of the game. As a player, Tyler was a goalie who came up through the New England junior hockey system, playing for the South Shore Kings and the Boston Junior Bruins. He went on to play college hockey at Southern New Hampshire University, where he served as captain and finished his career as the program's all-time leader in saves. After college, he played professionally in Europe before transitioning into coaching. On the coaching and development side, Tyler returned to the Kings, where he worked his way from goaltending coach into assistant coach, assistant general manager, and eventually head coach and general manager of the NCDC team, leading the program to a Dineen Cup championship. Along the way, he's also coached at the prep level at Milton Academy under Coach Kanata for many years. He's worked in scouting and hockey operations roles with the Sioux City Musketeers in the USHL, and also currently contributes to NHL Central Scouting, where he helps evaluate draft-eligible players at the highest level here in New England. Taken together, Tyler brings a rare end-to-end perspective on the development pipeline, and we cover all of that and more in this discussion. We talk about Tyler's journey in the sport. We talk about the development path, how that's been evolving. We talk about what Tyler looks for in players, both with his coach and GM hat on, but also as a scout. We talk about which aspects are innate and which can be taught, and specifically what Tyler does and what philosophies he implements to teach and develop as part of the Kings. It's a great discussion, and I hope you enjoy it. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be on here today and looking forward to chatting with you.
I like the Rink whiteboard in the background. It's on brand.
Yeah, just here in the office and like you said, whiteboard behind me and got the lineup and all sorts of players and yeah, on we go.
Well, for starters, Tyler, before we dig into your journey and how you found the sport and all that, maybe just frame it. I know you wear some different hats today with different organizations, and so it'd be great just to understand your portfolio of hockey responsibilities at this moment in time.
Yeah, so my main, obviously, responsibility, I am the general manager and head coach for the South Shore Kings in the NCDC. That's a Tier 2 Junior A league, primarily on the East Coast here. I've been in this position this is my fourth year. Along with that, I do some scouting for Sioux City Musketeers. I've been with them for 6 years. So in that role, pretty much just cover, the scouting here in the East, prep school, midget hockey, and do some crossover scouting as well. But again, primarily my focus is the players out here in the East. And then along with that, I'm the regional scout here in the East for NHL Central Scouting. So with that, I'm in charge of watching draft-eligible prospects for the NHL draft.
Nice. Well, now we can go in the Wayback Machine. So how'd you come into playing hockey way back in the day? Did it run in your family? Were you the first one into the sport? How'd you find it? Or how did it find you?
So my dad played hockey growing up and honestly just picked it up at a very young age. We had a backyard rink growing up. So, the cold nights, being out there every night, obviously looking back on that was obviously super fun as a kid and just kept going with it. I was both a goalie and a skater for many years. I think probably till I was about 10 or 11. And then from there, I was a goalie full time, through peewees and bantams and then into high school hockey. And then from there, played Division III college hockey at Southern New Hampshire University, and then was fortunate after I graduated there to go on and play 2 years of semi-professional hockey in Europe, 2 years in the Netherlands. Just an unbelievable experience. Obviously, to be able to play hockey was great, but honestly, it was just being over there, experimenting with just different cultures and getting to know different people and just the way of life over there was unbelievable. So very fortunate as a kid, just having, my parents, everything they gave me and allowing me to play the sport at a young age, and just my experiences over the years and everything has been nothing but special.
As you were coming up in the game, I mean, could you have guessed at that time that you would end up making a career in the sport and that it would be as big a part of your life as it is well into adulthood?
I think as I got older, especially in college, I kind of knew that, right? And when you get to college, it's like, all right, what's next? What am I going to do when I graduate? And hockey's kind of my life, right? It always has been. And just, I really never thought about doing something different. So when it became time to hang the skates up, I got right into coaching. That was back in 2016. I got right into coaching here with the Kings. I started just as a goaltending coach. I was the goalie director for the South Shore Kings youth program, and worked with the midget and junior teams as well. More of like a part-time position at the time. Along with that, I was fortunate to get hired by Paul Canada at Milton Academy, where I spent 6 seasons with him as an assistant coach. Did a lot of recruiting with Paul over the years there, and we had some excellent teams. So did both Milton Academy and the South Shore Kings for a number of years. And then, 3 years ago, the opportunity to jump in as the general manager and head coach came along, and I jumped all over it, and it's been a blast since. We've had a lot of success here. We have a winning culture. We've been to the finals 3 years in a row. We won it all in 2024. But more than that, right? It's about the players, and we've had so many good players come through here. A lot of players, now playing college hockey. So again, it's been awesome, and I'm very fortunate. My past experiences have really helped me get to where I am now.
And if I read right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're a Massachusetts guy, played Massachusetts hockey growing up, and went straight from high school into D3. So no juniors, no PG, no any of that. Did I get that right?
So I went to Bishop Fian High School, where I played 3 years of high school hockey. My senior year, I did play junior hockey for the Boston Junior Bruins. I played for Chris Masters. And then I did do a year after high school here playing for Scott Harlow at the time, was the head coach of the South Shore Kings. So spent a year playing for him. And then right after that, went on to play 4 years, like I said, at Southern New Hampshire University.
One question I have is just, versus the time that you were coming up in the game, what are some of the key differences as you look at the state of the game today?
It's different significantly. And it's, when you think about it, just from when I played, as a kid, and honestly, like even in high school and junior hockey and college, like how different it is now. And just, I think what's available for these families and obviously the players, like we didn't have that when I was growing up, like the specialization with skill development, one-on-one coaching in the spring and summer, the summer tournament teams that these kids are playing on, the brick tournament. Like there's just a lot of options right now. And kids, obviously the hockey season starts usually Labor Day, at the youth level, and it goes till, early March. And then honestly, like kids are going right into spring hockey, spring tournament teams, working with their skill coaches, and then right into summer tournament teams, playing in summer leagues, strength and conditioning. Like there's just a lot out there that people are offering. And it's just, again, it's 12 months, right? It never ends. So we didn't really have that when I was a kid and going through, like I said, high school, junior hockey, college. You usually played hockey, and when the spring rolled around, you put the hockey skates away and you played baseball or you played lacrosse, and then you usually picked up hockey back, towards July, so, but again, it's totally different now, and just the resources available for these families and kids, it's unbelievable.
Well, I mean, there's some obvious benefits to that in terms of the increase in skill level in the game, which is, I mean, even very visible. I mean, I look at my son's 13, and I feel like these 13-year-old teams could probably beat my high school varsity team from when I was coming up in the game. I do worry a bit when it comes to earlier specialization and earlier professionalization in terms of burnout, in terms of who's steering the ship. How much of that is coming from mom or dad versus coming from the kids. And if you make it a job too early, does it ruin the fun of it? I worry about variety and building muscles in other areas, building friendships in other areas. But then, I mean, there's some obvious benefits to it too, in terms of learning at a young age how to develop habits and discipline and mastery. So I'll stop rambling, but that's kind of the tug of war and back and forth that I do as a dad. I'd love to hear just how you think about those trade-offs.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I'm seeing it honestly more and more, with players that maybe are, the best player at age 10 or 11, 12, and then by the time they get, 15U, 16U, like it's different, right? Kids catch up to you, kids hit puberty, and all of a sudden you're not the best player, right? And you kind of plateau, right? And sometimes, the players that are so good at a young age and maybe a lot better, than the rest of the pack, now it's like, all right, do those players continue to progress? Do those players continue to put in the work? Whereas some of these other players that are maybe on the smaller side at that age, they start to grow. They really focus on, the strength and conditioning. Now all of a sudden, 15U, 16U, these players are close, and some players are passing, the players that were better at age 10. I'm seeing that a lot, and I think going back to it, I talk about, age 10, 11, like the amount of hockey these kids are playing at that age, it's crazy, and you're just seeing more and more kids getting burnt out by the time they get into high school.
Yeah, but you can also see why, because the path's getting harder and harder to play beyond youth, right? And so on the one hand, it's like, well, I know if the kid doesn't dial back, they're going to burn out, and they should also have other experiences so that they're a well-rounded athlete and a well-rounded human. But on the other hand, the path is getting so much more competitive, and my kid loves the game, and I want them to have the opportunity to play, and therefore, like, they got to grind, right? And it's like, you can chase yourself around in circles, and I don't know if there's a right answer, and I'm sure it's different for every kid and every family, and that's what people say when they come on this show, but I don't know. Like, if there is a right answer, I really don't know it, and I find I'm wrestling with that tug of war every day. And then you say, like, well, let the kids drive, but it's like, well, if I let the kids drive, they would just sit on their smartphones all day eating Doritos, right? So
it's very interesting, like, my thing for families is like, let the kids be kids, that they have to love the sport. And if they don't, it's fine, but don't make it about you as parents. Don't force your kids to play a sport just because you want them to. Like, they have to love it, especially hockey, right? It's a very expensive sport. There's a lot of time and energy put in by everybody, right? So again, let the kids be kids, and if they like it, continue with it, right? Give them that opportunity. But again, it's a grind, and the players have to be committed to sticking to it. But most importantly, have to love going to the rink every single time they're there.
So Tyler, jumping over to the professional hats that you described with the Musketeers and with the Kings and with the NHL. So are they synergistic? Do they feed each other, or is it really kind of three separate and distinct hats?
Yeah, so I think on the scouting side, so obviously I coach and scout for a living. The scouting side, out here, I'm primarily watching, midget hockey, and high school hockey, New England prep school. So, it does go hand in hand a bit. I'm watching prep school games to try to find players for the South Shore Kings. Our team over the years has been made up of primarily prep school players, and then obviously going to prep school games, like there's players that are at the next level, right? That hopefully can get to the USHL level, and then obviously with Central Scouting, we have a few players that we've identified in New England prep school that we're tracking for the NHL draft. So I would say it all does go hand in hand, and I do enjoy both sides of it, coaching and having that atmosphere of helping players achieve their goals and getting them to the next level. But I also really enjoy watching players, tracking players, seeing them progress. And for here with South Shore, we've had a lot of success, like I said, with the prep school kids. So just going to those games, you identify a lot of players, and for the USHL or here for my team with South Shore, it's really important for me to be watching a lot of games.
Given that that time is money, and the more efficiently you use your time, the better the output that comes out the other side. I mean, not just in your profession, but really in any profession. How do you determine how to use that time with your scout hat on? How much pre-scouting do you do? What do you look for when you're there? And how do you connect the dots between what you see and what you then go to do?
It's a real interesting topic, and obviously I'm sure you talk to a lot of people. You ask them like, hey, what do you look for in a player? What do you look for when you're watching a game? And for me, the biggest thing is hockey sense. Like, you have to be able to think the game, especially as you get older and you're playing at a high level and hoping to get to the next level. Like, you have to be able to think the game. You have to have a feel, for every situation, every time you're on the ice. And I think from there, it's about being competitive. I'm looking for players that are super competitive. They want to impact the game every time they're on the ice. And that's just, people think about like, oh, impacting the game is scoring a goal or making a big play that leads to a goal. Like, no, like, there's many ways to impact the game, right? Blocking a shot, as a winger, chipping a puck out on the wall, centerman being low support for the D, down low in the D zone, or winning a faceoff. Like, there's so many different ways to impact a game. Goalies making timely saves, So again, like, hockey sense, being ultra competitive. And then from there, obviously, the skill, right? You have to be able to skate, right? You have to be able to have quick hands and have a quick release. But for me, like, I would rather have a player that, thinks the game at a high level, is ultra competitive. Maybe his skating and skill is average. I would rather have that player than the player that maybe is ultra skilled, maybe a little less competitive in the hockey sense, is a concern, right? So I think it's about finding, here in South Shore, we have 26-man roster, typically 23 skaters, 3 goalies. Like, I want 23 players that can all think the game and play with the high compete level.
If you look at those 3 areas you mentioned, the hockey sense, the competitiveness, and the skill, I mean, the skill is an obvious one in terms of how do you get it better? I mean, you get it better from reps. You go shoot pucks. You go, you practice you just practice, like, picture, you can, each of the different skill components you practice. I want to focus on the other 2 things, though, on compete and on hockey IQ. For each of those, and we can take them one at a time, how much is innate and how much can be taught? And to the extent they can be taught, how do you teach it?
Yeah, I would say hockey sense, actually both of them, hockey sense and being competitive, they both can be taught, right? And hockey sense, like, here, I'm a big believer in video, whether it's team video or doing one-on-one video with the players, and I think a lot of kids are visual learners, right? They have to see it. And a lot of, like, what we do, we try to put the players in situations during the week where it's more game-like, right? Where it's going to translate come Friday, Saturday. And then just, on the competitive side, like, I'm looking for players that are internally, they have that fuel, right? It doesn't take me as the coach to motivate them every time they're on the ice, every time they come back from a shift. I want players that are self-starters. That's a big thing, I talk about with my players. Like, be a self-starter, right? Have that internal drive, right? Have that accountability, right? You're going to have a bad shift. Don't have a bad period. Have a bad period. Don't have a bad game, right? I want those players that are internally motivated to wanting to get better on a daily basis, wanting to come to me to do one-on-one video, right? And usually, like, the more you show the players, I believe the more you're going to get out of them because they know you're invested in helping them get better.
So it's clear, I mean, like anyone with eyes can see that the skill level in the game and the speed of the game have increased a lot in the last several years and even decades. What do you think has been happening on the IQ side as the skill level has gone up? Has it decreased? Has it increased with the skill level? Has it stayed flat? Like, what is the IQ trajectory? How does it compare?
Yeah, that's a great topic, and I'm seeing a lot of that, especially as the kids get to the older levels, my level here in junior hockey. And I think a lot of it, right, is these kids are going to, and don't get me wrong, right, like the skill development part, going to a skating coach in the summer, right, super important, right? And there are a lot of good guys out there, especially here in New England, the Boston area, that do a phenomenal job with players. In the
some of them who work right out of Foxborough.
Yeah, we have a lot of great people right out of here. But I think what's missing a lot is the small area games, right? Especially at a young age. Like, the kids have to be able to kind of figure things out for themselves, in tight areas. They have to be able to make plays in tight areas, right? So I think a lot of times, we talk about like the spring and summer, the hockey season's over, and then all of a sudden it's just, I'm going to work with my skating coach, or I'm going to work with my goalie coach, on the fundamentals. But I think what's missing from all that is like just, coaches in the off season, spring and summer, just teaching kids how to play hockey, right? So for me, I'm seeing that a lot as the kids get to this age. Just some kids struggle to think it, right? And it just, their past experiences, maybe they haven't been in an environment where hockey sense or just the coaching in terms of teaching kids just how to play hockey, maybe that was missing. So
it'd be great to just kind of double click on the whole video helps for teaching IQ, and I use video a lot, just what that means. But I also want to talk about how video and on ice should be paired, because if you teach a concept on video, I would think that you'd want to reinforce it on the ice. But is that just through small area games without structure or with a constraint or two, or are there actually more kind of surgical ways to reinforce the concepts that you're trying to get across with the video?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll just use, myself, kind of our philosophy and what we do with our players here kind of on a daily basis, right? So again, I touched on, for me as a coach, I'm super big into video, and, on any given day, we're doing video when the kids arrive in the morning for the day here. And usually on any given day, it's one concept that we're going over. Maybe it's, D zone coverage, right? So that morning we're looking at, maybe it's our own clips from the weekend, some teaching moments on our D zone. Or maybe it's, me pulling up some NHL clips of a similar D zone that we play. And then right after we kind of show it as a staff, we go out kind of and reinforce and work on it, right? Same goes for, our forecheck or our special teams or neutral zone forecheck, right? I think kind of showing it, like, hey, this is what we're looking for. This is what we want to do. And then going out and implementing it, that same day. That's kind of the approach that we've taken here. So again, I just think both of them go hand in hand, both video and kind of the on ice part.
So in terms of that clip pulling, is it a very manual process, or is there technology that assists? And in terms of the drills that you're doing to reinforce it, are you inventing them? Are they coming from, coaches of teams that you've played on? Are there books or websites, or, how do you do the right creation and pairing?
Yeah, I would say for video, like, we use InStat. I know most, college programs, junior programs have InStat. All our games are broken down on InStat, so our players get their shifts, emailed to them after every game. We get a full, as a coaching staff, we get a full game breakdown, usually 12 hours or so after each game. On InStat, I can access any NHL game, make clips within the game, that are teaching clips to show our players. So we really utilize that on a daily basis. Obviously, it's an awesome tool to have. So again, that's super important for me as a coach.
And what about on the drill side?
Drill side, I would say listen, we're not reinventing the wheel, right? I think us as coaches, a lot of what we do is, I'll go back to my past experiences, coaching with Coach Kanata at Milton, or, playing under Scott Harlow when I played for the Kings. There's many people that I've been fortunate to be around over the years, and I've taken a lot from them, and a lot of what they've done, is what I'm kind of doing now with my own team.
And is apprenticeship in that way, formally or informally, the primary way that coaches learn, or is there any, call it a curriculum, call it a body of content, call it books that are not just for novelty and actually are substantive and applicable for coaches, even at a high level like what you're coaching?
Yeah, there's a lot of resources out there that are available, for coaches, right? Whether it's coaching symposiums, the NHL, coaching clinic, in the summer before the NHL draft, the coaches site. There's a lot of different tools available for coaches. But at the end of the day, I think and I'm not going to speak for other people, but I know for me, it really comes down to my past experiences being an assistant coach, or even just being a player, and kind of, remembering, a lot of the things that, Coach Kanata, or I referenced before, or Coach Harlow when I played for the Kings. It's those people that you learn from, right? And I took a lot from those guys, and like I said, a lot of what I do now is honestly a lot, what they did when I was with them.
Where do analytics come into play, if at all? You mentioned you get a full game write-up from InStat after every game, and the players get their shifts. Is there certain data that you have come to rely on and that plays a meaningful role in dictating strategy, or is the eye test still largely carrying the day?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. The eye test for me is, at the end of the day, you have to go out and execute, right? And we do a lot of pre-scout, on each opponent, right? I try not to show, a ton to the players, because I think at the end of the day, it's about your team and going out and executing, right? So I try not to show a ton, but I do think, the analytics and just overall video and showing players some tendencies of your opponent, I do think it's important, right? And usually, a lot of what we show is just, special teams, power play, PK, some tendencies that teams have there, maybe the forecheck, or, what type of D zone they play, box and one, or maybe their wingers press up on the D, or are they man on man? There's things to show players, but, in terms of the overall analytics, there's so much available to coaches, right? When we talk about the game breakdowns that we get after each game, I could pull up a playlist of, all my centermen's, their face-offs, right? I can send each centerman, their face-offs from the previous game. And it's a clip of each face-off, win or lose, right? Expected goals, right? That's a big thing we look at. Scoring chances, high danger scoring chances, for and against, line rushes against, there's so many different things to look at, and just what we have available to us, it's really unbelievable.
When you think about the rise in individual skills that you mentioned, I get that it can't be enough, that you need to also do things like small area games that are translatable to game environments, but are there certain kinds of individual skills, or certain quantities of individual skills that aren't just maybe not as helpful as focusing on other things, but can even be detrimental to a player's development in terms of game translatable ability?
Yeah, like listen, like, the skill part, like you have to be able to skate, right? You have to be able to, especially, as you get to higher levels, you have to be able to make plays, right, in tight space, right? And going back to, the skill development part and doing those things in the off season, like they're important. But at the end of the day, like, I don't care what anybody says, you have to be able to think the game. You have to be able to process the game, right? You have to be a self-starter, right? You have to be competitive, right? And I just think without those things, you're going to have a real hard time, especially as you try to get to the next level.
In your experience, the players that have those things when they are older, juniors, college, pro, etc., are they the same ones that kind of had those things innately when they were little guys? I mean, I know puberty you can't control in terms of growth and strength and that kind of stuff. But what about these more non-size and weight related attributes like compete or thinking the game? Is it consistently the ones that were good at it early that are good at it later, or can that get turned on its head?
I'm a firm believer that, you develop those traits over time, right? And we talked about early in this conversation, it's not the ones that do those things really well at a young age, they're not always the ones that do it, when they get older. Some players just, it takes more time, right? Some players just need more reps, to figure things out, so we get players here, when they're 18 years old coming out of prep school that still, maybe can't think certain situations, right? And it's up to us as coaches to help them navigate through that, right? Whether it's doing one-on-one video, or just, staying with them after practice to show them some things. But it's just every player is different, and some players are really good at a young age and they continue to progress, and they're the best of the best come 18, 19 years old. But again, there's also the players that peak at such a young age that get passed by others, by the time they get to high school.
What about the craft of coaching itself? As the game has evolved, how has coaching evolved, and what are some differences in terms of what it takes to be a great coach today versus when you were coming up in the game?
Yeah, like, one thing for me is, when you form a team and you bring a team together, late August, there are a lot of personalities, right? And as a coach, you need to understand that every player is different in their own way. And as a coach, it's how do you manage the, here are 26 personalities, right? And for me, it's about kind of just knowing that and knowing that each player is different in their own way. But at the same time, as a coach, making sure that all 26 players kind of have the same mindset. And I just think, being a player's coach is obviously, so important nowadays, right? And I think just for the players knowing that their coach cares, that's super important, right? And having a coach that is going to put the time and energy into doing the extra things to help the players, whether that's, we talked about before, the video, one-on-one video, or, making calls to college coaches or junior coaches at higher levels, right? I think there's so much that goes into this, and the more you can show the players how much you care, the more you're going to get out of them in the long run.
Some people have come on this show and talked about how steel sharpens steel, and you want to play at as high level as you can execute well in. And others have come on and said, don't be in a rush. Don't leave too early, until you're dominating at one level, like stay right where you are. And if you rush, you can do damage. How do you think about that tension, and what's your advice to players and families trying to navigate their own journeys in the game?
It's an interesting topic, and like I said before, like every player is different in their own way. Every player has a different path, right? And a lot of people ask, like, what is the right path? Like, I don't think there is one path, honestly, and Some players, will go to prep school for 4 years, or some kids will go to prep school and repeat and then play 2 years of junior hockey. They'll grind it out and maybe, a junior league or two junior leagues, whatever that might look like, and then get to college. Some kids maybe need 1 year of junior hockey and then get to college. Some kids will do a post-grad year at a prep school and then go right to college, or then do 1 year of junior hockey, right? So there's so many different paths. But for me, the one thing I always come back to is what's important is school, right? You have to be a good student, right? And if you want to play at the next level, right, college hockey, right, you have to have a good academic background, plain and simple, right? You could be the best player or one of the best players at your age group, but if you don't have the academic background, if you don't have good grades, you're gonna have a real hard time getting to somewhere where you want to go.
I'd love to push on that one a little more because, something I've observed is as the landscape gets more competitive, I've heard you even talk with, like, when you went on the New England Hockey Journal podcast, you talked about how, versus prep, on the Kings, you get so much more ice. You get video, you get gym, right. And it's like all right there. Right. And you're seeing this. That's kind of the value prop of some of these academies that are popping up, where it's like you go to school in the rink on Zoom school, and then you get so much more ice, as much ice as you want. And there's a shooting room, and there's gym, and there's, mindset, and there's video, and there's whatever. But on the same token, like you said, in the life path, right, education's important. And even just being able to function when you finally get to the college, right, like academics matter. So, it feels like an almost impossible task to manage that tension, because both pieces demand more of you than there is time in the day. And somehow you need to find a way to manage each of them together.
Yeah. And it's different, right? Where, prep school, compared to junior hockey, right? They're two totally different environments. Prep school, you kind of have a full day of academics and in hockey and strength and conditioning, and then study hall, and then you're doing it all over again the next day. And junior hockey, most players are out of high school. They've graduated from high school, where the focus really is just hockey. And here you're coming to the rink at 9:30 every morning. You're starting every day with video, team video, that is. And then you're going on the ice maybe as, a D corps and getting extra work in with the D coach, for 15, 20 minutes. Then it's team practice. And then right after that, you're going upstairs, to work with the strength coach for an hour. Now we're at 2:00. You've been here for 4 hours and the focus is hockey, and then after that, maybe it's your meeting with coach one-on-one to go through your shifts on InStat, or you're meeting with coach to see where things are at with colleges, right? So they're two totally different kind of things, two totally different environments, right? And I just think, what's available to players at the junior level, it's second to none. It's hockey 24/7.
So there's a few trends I want to highlight. One is that it seems, and I think I also heard you talk about this on your episode with Evan, that kids are leaving prep more and more and not finishing so that they can go play juniors, because if the colleges look at them without the juniors experience, they have to wonder how they're going to do when they get to juniors. So like, I kind of want to see what they can do with the big boys before I know that they're truly ready, regardless of how many points they have in prep, right? And similarly, it seems like the age of incoming freshmen is continuing to get later in the sport, right? It's a late blooming sport. At the same time, you have some kids that are skipping juniors altogether and going straight from prep into college, being a 17-year-old at BU or something, or the other way, straight from prep into the NESCAC, right, where they might have gone D1 if they had gone for and done their duty, their tour of duty in juniors first. So I guess my question is, How do you know what players can skip juniors? But then a separate question, which is also important, which is just because you can doesn't mean you should. So what advice do you have for when it makes sense to skip juniors versus making sure you do the tour of duty, whether you need to or not?
Well, the first thing I would say to that is, most players have to do a year of junior hockey after they graduate from high school. Some 2, some 3, right? I go back to what I said before, like every player is different. Every player has a different path. Going back to your kind of your question on, when should you leave maybe high school hockey to jump into junior hockey? Like most kids leave after, 4 years playing at a prep school or high school and then junior hockey. But you're seeing it now a lot too with kids jumping early. Kids leaving after their freshman or sophomore year of high school, to step into junior hockey. For some, it works. Don't get me wrong. For some kids, maybe physically they're ready to make the jump. But you do see a lot of kids that make the jump early that have a hard time. And now all of a sudden it's, we talk about development. Like, are you getting enough puck touches? Are you getting enough reps? Are you getting enough minutes come game time? What's your confidence like when things aren't going well? How's the coaching staff gonna work with you when things aren't going well, right? Because let's be honest, like every player goes through adversity, whether you're a younger player or you're an older player. Adversity always kicks in, and it's how you deal with it. And for some younger players, there's adversity early on in junior hockey. You see it all the time, right? And sometimes that can go the other way, right? Where you can't recover from it, right? So I think just, my message to families, players that are trying to navigate through it, should I leave after my sophomore year to go play junior hockey? Well, like, you really have to do your homework. Where are you going to go play? What's the coaching staff like? What's the history of the organization? What's the history of players moving on, to the next level from that program? What's the history of young players going to that organization and doing well? What's the living environment if I'm a 16, 17-year-old moving away from home, right? Like, there's a lot that goes into it, right? And for a parent, like, you should be asking those questions, right? Because honestly, like, staying that extra year or graduating, there's nothing wrong with that. Especially if you're at a high-end academic school. I coached at Milton, one of the top prep schools in North America. To be able to graduate from Milton Academy, like, that's special, right? And that carries a lot of weight in the long run, right? And there's other tremendous schools out there. But again, you just, if you are going to leave early, you really just have to do your due diligence on the situation and just what's the environment going to be like when I get there.
So coming back around to an NCDC specific question, I've heard you say on Evan's show that that the NCDC sometimes doesn't get enough credit. And actually, if you come see the caliber of play, and I mean, increasingly, if you look at where the placements are going coming out of there, right? I mean, I know the Kings have been quite successful recently with some really great college placements, that the NCDC is on the rise. At the same time, with the rule changes, right, there's all these new pools of players that are opening up that these colleges have access to. So what are you seeing in terms of the implication of those rule changes and how that's impacting your world in the NCDC and the development path for the players that you tend to work with?
It's interesting, right? And when all this kind of happened, a few months back with the rule changes and the CHL, the players being eligible to play college hockey here now in the United States, you wonder, like, oh, geez, how's this going to impact the players that I get here in South Shore? Like, are they going to have a hard time getting to college hockey now, right? So all those things came up, right, when this all went down a few months back. But I think for us, and I'll just speak for kind of what we do here and obviously the success we've had with placing players, like, we've found a niche of, most of our team, year after year is made up primarily of New England prep school players. Obviously myself, I have that background of coaching at a New England prep school, right? And just having, a group of players that have all come from similar past experiences that are all solid students, right? They come here for a year, some two, right? And then they go on to, a lot of them really good Division III college hockey programs, and here we deal with a lot of the NESCAC schools, right? We Babson, Coach Rice, another phenomenal school, phenomenal hockey program, right? And I think those coaches, knowing that we have a lot of good, sharp students here, right? They want to come watch our players, right? So, you said it before, like, listen, every league has good teams, has bad teams. Every league has good operators, has bad operators, right? So if you're a family or a player trying to navigate through this when you graduate from high school, or like, where should I go play? Like, again, like, do your homework. Where can you go where maybe it's a good location? We're 40 minutes south of Boston. We're 20 minutes north of Providence. We have a lot of college hockey programs right in our backyard where it's convenient for coaches to come watch, right? That's a big sell for us, right? And I think it's why, honestly, we've had a lot of success here with placing players at the next level.
So for the players and families that are trying to navigate and maybe in prep now and thinking about that, juniors, first of all, what do you think about agents or advisors rather, and who should have them and when should they have them? And then relatedly, because for whatever reason, I always seem to ask my question in twos, what communication do you want and when and from who? Like, what comes from the advisor, what comes from the parents, and what comes from the kids and when? Like, do they just wait and then you'll let them know if you're interested when you show up at the games, or do you like the inbound outreach as well?
I think having, we talk about advisors and right, like there's a lot of them out there. I think having somebody kind of in your corner, so to say, I think it's important, right? And there are a lot of them out there. But again, as from a family standpoint, like, I think it's super important that you're finding the right person that has a great background, that's in it for the right reasons. And if you could find that individual who's looking out for your son or daughter, I think it's great. And for me as a coach, we deal with, agents and advisors all the time. I get texts or emails, daily from guys. Hey, like, you're interested in this player. Hey, like this guy's looking for a new team. That's really how it comes about in terms of, getting players here. But also a lot of it is, me going out to watch a game and, ooh, I like this guy, and then me going on, Rink net and finding out who his advisor is, and then contacting his advisor. Hey, is so-and-so looking to play a year of junior hockey? Would he be interested in coming to look at the South Shore Kings? So I think, you're seeing it more and more, like all these players, have advisors and agents. So, we work closely with all of them. And I like to think when the players get here, though, I think the one thing that maybe goes unnoticed a little bit is, like, when the players get here, like, the coaching part, is the easy part, right? It's the fun part. The other side of it is, like, my job is to get these players placed and get them on to the next level. And we obviously spend a ton of time every day on the phone with college coaches, talking about players we have here, getting college coaches, players' transcripts, right? And, with that comes the advisors too, right? They're working closely with coaching staffs and college coaches. It's kind of a group effort, when it comes to trying to help these players move along to the next level.
I've heard some college coaches come on and talk about how their job has become increasingly more transactional in both directions. Transactional in terms of, them maybe being more recruiting focused than player development focused because of stuff like the portal, right? But also from the player standpoint, it's like, being a lot more likely to hit the eject button with any adversity, versus grinding it out and proving themselves because of the portal, right? And so I guess my question for you is, given that, but also just given the transient nature of the NCDC, where you get them in for 1 year or 2 year or 3 years, and then the goal is to send them on their way. How much of your job is recruiting versus development, and how much in your ideal world would it be?
It starts with recruiting, right? You want to get the right players here, and that's super important to me. Like team culture, having good people, having, here a 26-man roster of really good people that all have the right, and similar mindset. But I think like a lot of it, when you talk about the players need to understand that it is a process, right? And what goes into this, it's not going to happen overnight, right? There's going to be a lot of adversity along the way, right? And it's for players, like, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the adversity? How do you deal when something bad happens to you, right? So as a coach, like, for me, it's super important that, we're helping players navigate through those challenging times, because there is going to be challenging times. It's just a matter of when that happens to that individual. And as coaches, like, it's our job to work with the players through those tough times and get them back on the right path.
As it seems like the path is getting harder for the local boys and girls, as there's more options for these teams at the college level. The benefit from a college coach's standpoint, and they've said it, is that they're going to build better teams and the competition is going to get higher, right? But as a local player, right, that means it's a tougher road and a smaller probability that you'll make it. From where you sit, how do you feel about the landscape getting harder, and what do you hope looking forwards in terms of how that changes, if at all, and what might change to facilitate it?
Yeah, it is a hard road right now for players. We're seeing it. It feels like every week that goes by, it's getting more harder and harder for these kids, right? And I think a lot of it is it's mental too, right? Because a lot of these kids are seeing, especially at my level, right? Like, a lot of kids are seeing now that the CHL players can play, Division I college hockey, and probably at some point Division III college hockey. Now for a lot of these local kids, it's like, well, shoot, like, am I going to have a spot in college hockey? What's my path to get there? And a lot of kids right now, are having a difficult time. Good players in various leagues, they're having a hard time, getting to a college program, where maybe a year ago it was a lot easier. You had good grades, so a college program took you, and you're a good hockey player. Now it's like there are a lot of good players out there and not enough spots. That's just what it comes down to.
And when you look directionally, what do you think one, does there need to be an answer, or do you think that actually, like, I don't think it's broken, it's just a natural course? Like, is there something that needs fixing? So if more spots would be beneficial, which is a question, right? What's the best way to bring that about?
Well, you need more teams. You need more college hockey programs, both at the Division I and in Division III levels, right? And listen, like, club hockey now, it's a great option for kids. And some players can go right out of high school and go play club hockey, right? And that's a home run, right? Some players want to grind out junior hockey, but at the end of the day, like, right now, when we talk about, like, NCAA, the Division I and Division III level, like, there's not enough opportunity for kids, and it's too bad, right? Because there are a lot of good hockey players out there that are honestly getting screwed from all this, right? So I think, how do we fix it? Hopefully in the long run, you have more college, hockey programs at both levels coming up.
So as a player and family trying to navigate, especially given the cost, the time commitment, the travel, the sacrifice, right? I mean, it's an unbelievable sport, right? I mean, we're all here for a reason, right? But like, on the one hand, it's like, well, don't look at the odds. Like, don't focus on how much it'll hurt if you fall when you're climbing the ladder. Like, focus on how good it will feel when you get to the summit, right? Because if you don't,
Sure.
if you don't even try, then you have no shot. So no matter what the odds are, like if you want it badly enough, then go for it. Like, I get that, right? So you don't want to give up on your dreams or give up on your kids' dreams, but at the same time, like there can be a point at which like your delusion and detachment from reality is not healthy, right? And so where's that line?
I see it a lot. Like a lot of these kids are getting fed, the wrong information, and all of a sudden they got, a lot of voices in their head and they're trying to figure out what the right path is, and my thing, it's simple. Like if you love the game, you want to play hockey, you should play hockey. Right? So if it's, you go to a high school and play at a mediocre level of high school hockey, and you want to play, junior hockey after high school, do it. Right? At the end of the day, the percentage of players that make it to professional hockey, it's obviously super slim. Right? So my message to kids is like, enjoy it, because at some point it's going to end. Right? So if you want to play, high school hockey or prep school and then a couple of years of junior hockey, even if it's at a lower level, by all means, right? Enjoy it. Right? And if it's club hockey for 4 years, great. Okay. If it's NCAA Division 3 or Division 1, outstanding. But again, for a player that just loves the game and wants to play, I think it's great that there's a lot of opportunity for kids, at the junior hockey level after high school to play for a couple of years.
Looking forwards, if you look ahead, say 5 years, 10 years, what are your predictions on where the game will be and where do you hope it'll be?
There are a lot of good hockey players out there. We're seeing it every year. Like, and even at a young age, kids are so good now at such a young age. And I just hope, 2, 3, 5 years from now, I just hope there's enough opportunity for kids to play at a high level, right? Because we just talked about it, right? Right now there's not enough opportunity, right? Come time to play in college. And listen, it's hard to play in college. Division 3 college hockey is really good. You have to be a really, really good hockey player to play at that level. Never mind Division 1, right? But I hope down the road, like I said before, I hope there's more, programs that are going to pop up for these kids, where they can play even at the Division 3 level.
What do you think the biggest barriers are? And I mean, other people have come on the show and said cost to skip to the punchline, but what are the biggest barriers to more programs popping up, and what can we do about it?
Well, there's really nothing you can do about it. And the costs, it's, hockey is an expensive sport, right? And, earlier in this conversation, we talked about, how hockey it really never ends. You go from your fall, winter season to right into spring hockey, right into summer hockey, and the amount of money and time and energy that goes into this, it's crazy, right? But I don't think there's much that we can really do about this. You know what I mean?
We've covered a lot in this episode, Tyler. Is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I did, or any parting words you'd like to leave with listeners?
No, I think obviously some great topics, some great touching points. I don't believe anything else.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show. I guess my last question is just for anyone that heard this, that wants to learn more, about the Kings, about the Musketeers, about the NHL. Is there, who do you want to hear from, and what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, obviously, I'm pretty easy to talk to, and if people want to reach out to me directly, they can. My email's right on the South Shore Kings website. Same with my phone number. I love talking hockey, so absolutely feel free to reach out with any questions, or if I can help in any way, happy to do so.
Okay, great. Tyler, thanks again, and best of luck in the remainder of the season.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Puck Academy. If you enjoyed this episode, follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and share it with someone serious about their game. See you next week.